We're getting ready to show you a really beautiful video that was put together for us by Horsepower Productions and our friend John Harris, who is a friend of so many in the room. John does amazing work on behalf of so many of our organizations.
So Youth Shelter really has its origins in Room at the Inn and the Men's Shelter for the been around time, but it existed as separate entities. In about 2019, a group of folks started to talk about what it would mean to bring those two things. And about that time, Safe Camp was what became the Safe Place micro shelter program. And so it just made sense to pull those things together. So we operate emergency shelter and transitional housing in Corvallis, and by December we should have pretty close to 160 beds.
Hi, my name is Taryn, and I am the manager of the men's shelter. The guys that I have at the men's shelter are the best. We have a wide variety of guests that come from all different places and all have really unique stories and often have different skills. I guess I would say that the guys that I have in the shelter, right, are just like anyone else that you would find, but that have faced, either an event that changed their life and brought them here to the shelter, or a series of events that, dramatically changed their life and brought them to being in a place like this. All of our guests have stories, they have families, or they have families. So many of our guests are veterans. It is more difficult to help someone at a campsite. They're right here, and we've got the resources. We have a high need for financial donations because we need to be able to feed our guests. We need to be able to staff the shelter to have the guys inside here. Homelessness, in many ways, means isolation. You are isolated from the people that used to be in your life. You are isolated from society. And in many ways, there are so many barriers to getting resources that you are isolated from the greater community, and you are unable to get the help that you want and need. So I think that there are many challenges that we're facing that, as a program, as an organization, and as a society.
Well, when we see people, they really have been living day to day, and trying to work with them to get to a point where they're thinking about their future and planning ahead a week, a month, a year, that's a huge change. And it means that their brain chemistry is starting to readjust to some stability and safety again, that they're starting to think about goals beyond permanence. What gives me the most hope is when I see somebody who we watched and struggle with what's going to be their future, and are they ever going to actually make it out of shelter or out of transitional housing, and you just get to see them move on and be successful, and that's a huge payoff, right? And I love the fact that every night we've got people in who would be vulnerable now, and that in itself is good. But when you see them actually make progress in their lives and move into housing and really start to see things change, that's big. Everybody that works here has choices of where they can work, and they choose to work here. And when we had to do layoffs, we had staff that said, "Can I come back and volunteer? Because I just care about this work so much." That gets you. You realize that it's not just a paycheck.
My name is Bonnie Thompson, and I'm at Room at the Inn. I ended up as a homeless car camper in 2014, and that lasted 6 years. And then when the pandemic started, I moved to room at the inn because car camping just didn't work anymore because the library was closed, the stores were closed. The shelter just provided us a home during the pandemic, and it was just a tremendous benefit. It's so hard for people when they're living outside to really make any progress with personal issues at all because it takes so much time and energy just to get through each day. For me personally, it's really been just incredibly helpful to have had the opportunity to find my issues at my own way. Anybody who has been here very long will tell you that how I was behaving and appearing a year ago is totally different from the way I'm behaving and appearing now. I'm so much more functional. I'm just doing so much better, and I'm getting ready to start looking for work. Most people probably don't. There's just no way for most people to understand what a battle it is to get back to normal life once you've been homeless for a number of years. It's just a tremendous battle. There's just a lot of anxiety, and it kind of just saps your emotional reserves. So it's just a very draining lifestyle to live outside, and it's very, very difficult to make progress. So having, yes, the stability, having everything you need in one place is just key. But so on top of that, you're here, plus there are all these really friendly, loving folks. One of the things that Room at the Inn really excels at is assisting people in that battle. They are very supportive, very empathetic and compassionate, and really, really good at making sure people find out about the resources they need to move forward.
I love this place. This place is an old tire shop with a leaky roof, and I love this place. Some of our guests have experienced chronic homelessness, and they've been to many different shelters, and they've told me many times that this is the best shelter they've ever been to, that we have the best beds, the most comfortable beds, and the best staff, that the staff here treats them better than anyone else. So.
Every unrestricted gift that we get allows us to push the edge a little bit more in terms of how do we innovate our services, how do we try something new, how do we experiment and deepen that, that level of care that we can provide. Because sometimes you've got to start trying some new things before you can get grant money to sustain it.
In my view, it would be an excellent investment of time or funds because of the huge difference they make in people's lives. And it just works. People get back on track, and they go back to taking care of themselves. And so to me that it's a really good investment.
I guess we'll forgive closed captioning for thinking room at the inn is room at the end, which sounds just not so pleasant, really. But auto-generated. No, not John's doing. Well, we owe so many thank yous to people in the room for being a part of that video and for helping with the production of it and arranging schedules. And we owe a lot to you, too, here in the room with us today. And what we'd like to do this afternoon is invite you not just to be funders of the project, but to be partners with us in this work. And we think part of the job of Unity Shelter is to be involved in education and advocacy in our community. So we're workshopping a little bit of a panel this afternoon to talk about issues of housing, the crisis of houselessness, and some of the contributing factors in this model, which is something that we are looking forward to getting better and better at, and providing opportunities to the Corvallis community as a whole to join us for panels around education and also advocacy work. So we are not professionals at this. This is our first go. We're hoping that you'll be really generous with our having a real conversation. We are not rehearsed. There is no script. So we just want to be in conversation with each other a little bit and then invite you into a time of Q&A with us. And then we'll hear from our board president, Ginny Lucker. And so I ask, if you have something to write on or a way to take a note on your phone, if there's a question you really want to ask, to remember it somehow by the time we get to Q&A, and we're running a little late. I won't point fingers, but we'll try to keep track of time. I'm glad that you just admitted that it was you. Oh, thanks, Pat. My name is Jen Butler. I'm so used to being right here. I think everyone must know who I am. That's not true. I'm Jen Butler, and I'm the senior minister at this congregation. And along with my congregation and folks who are living outside, we founded the Safe Camp program, which has become the Safe Place Micro Shelter program. And now Unity Shelter is our primary partner and organization that cares for folks who are living in that transitional housing program. And that's an excellent segue to who is everyone else sitting up here. So Jake, tell us who you are.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob. I'm a community health worker with Unity.
Can you hear Jake? Okay. Do you think your mic's on?
My mic is on, but I'll project more. Hi, everyone. My name is Jacob. I go by Jake. I'm a community health worker with Unity Shelter. I originally started out working with Unity as a shelter staff member in 2021 at the Corvallis Men's Shelter, and I transitioned to this new position as a community health worker in 23, sorry.
I'm really impressed with your projection skills, Jake, and yet I feel like that mic is not on. It seems on to you? Okay, Ashley?
Can everyone hear me? My voice is a little lower. No, in the front.
Can you ice cream cone that mic? Like,
How about this one?
oh
yeah.
Beautiful.
Cool. Maybe we'll just use one.
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
right.
Oh, it's so nice to see so many beautiful people in the crowd today. My name is Ashley Vaughn. I'm a board member on Unity Shelter. This is my first year on the board. I'm sort of new to Oregon, but I'm an educator, proud community member, and then in my spare time, I also teach at OSU, so happy to be here.
My name is Mary Kenyon, and I volunteer at Room at the End. I work in the kitchen.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Moksha. I just joined the board of Unity Shelter. Previously, I was an employee for 2 years, working at every location that we have, and I work as a counselor in the community as well.
Okay. See if this works. Is that working okay? Okay. Sean Collins, I'm the executive director of Unity Shelter.
Is it working now?
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, church tech is not always up to par. So thank you all for introducing yourselves. Ashley and I have been in a little conversation about the work that you do and that you engage in the realm of public health. So lots of what seem like code words in the social service and public health arena. I don't think we always have good definitions for. So while we may have heard about social determinants of health, we might not really know what that means. Can you help explore that topic for us?
Sure, Jen. So I do teach at OSU. I'm here as a community member, but like I said, in my spare time, that's where I spend, a lot of my time. That's where I spend a lot of it. In my Primary areas where I teach are in the social determinants of health and planning and evaluating community health promotion programs. So Jen asked me to talk a little bit about social determinants of health, why housing is a social determinant of health, and what we know about what works to preventing and responding to housing issues. So we know that our social circumstances impact our health outcomes, right? And the social determinants of health are, if I read my definition, the conditions that and environments where people are born, where they live, where they learn, where they work, play, worship, and age that affects our health outcomes. As professionals, we tend to put these into buckets like our access to education, economic stability, our social and community context, our neighborhood and built environment, and our healthcare access. So typically when I talk to people about health, the first thing they think about is going to the doctor, right? That one-on-one interaction that we get. But in reality, the neighborhoods we live in, where we go to school, our economic stability make up over 50% of our chances for positive health outcomes. So in order for us to really address the health of ourselves and our communities, we have to tackle the social determinants of health first, and then making sure that people have access to the care and resources that they need.
I'm curious about one of the things that are on your notes. I read your notes before we sat down this morning, and so your notes also have this acronym ACEs as part of. I'm going to just read. You know where I am, right? In your notes.
I know where you are, Jen.
Yeah, I thought you did. I don't think that all of us know what ACEs are, and that is part of how we prevent housing issues. Your notes say this is part of how we prevent. So help us make that connection. What are ACEs? What do we need to know?
Sure. Can I just get a raise of hands if folks have heard of the term ACEs or adverse childhood experiences before? Cool, like 30%. I mean, not cool. Maybe not cool that you've heard of that. But for folks who didn't raise their hand, adverse childhood experiences are potentially traumatic events, things that happen before we turn 17, things like abuse, neglect, household dysfunction. The more ACEs that we experience, the greater our risk of negative health outcomes later on. And interesting, as I was preparing, looking at some literature for this talk, I looked at the connection between ACEs and housing issues. When we look at the connection between ACE and housing insecurity or homelessness, the lifetime prevalence for someone who is homeless who's experienced at least one ACE is 90%. So folks who are on the street, 90% of them have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience. If you compare that to folks in the general population, 35% of people in the general population have experienced an adverse childhood experience. The more adverse childhood experiences that we experience, the greater our risk for adverse health outcomes. Folks who are homeless, who have experienced 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, are over 50%. For folks in general population, the average is 3% of people that have experienced that. So we know that there's a high association between adverse childhood experiences and folks who are experiencing houselessness.
And Ashley, it's kind of easy to find an ACE test online, right? If folks are interested in what would my ACE score be, that's something you could Google and find relatively easily. What's the Sean, I know you know the answer to this. What's the highest? Ashley, you might know that too.
I'll let Sean go first.
You know, because I'm not sure what the top of the mark is.
Moksha, 11, so between 1 and 11. And just self-disclosure, my ACE is an 8. Sean has a pretty high ACE score too. And I think if we all sort of sat down and took that test together, we would find that, that collectively our score may be much higher than you might imagine. And that to me, Ashley, it makes me think about your notes around stigma, the stigma and bias that we have, because we think so often, well, these people are are not like me. And I think about, well, my ACE score is an 8. And so obviously we hold a lot in common. Can you talk a little bit about your understanding of what we know about who's homeless?
Yeah, this is always something that I'm really reflecting on and thinking about, you know, who gets, what the narrative is around housing and who is houseless and who actually experiences that in reality, and what that stigma of who folks believe to be houseless does to preventing us to put effective programs in place. But we know that perceptions are not aligned with realities. And I think that because you're here, you also know that that perception is not aligned with realities. But I looked up some current stats of who actually is houseless in our country. And in the past 3 decades, the share of people who are 55 or older and experiencing homelessness has increased from being 11% of the population to over 50%. So over 50% of people on the street are 55 and older. We also know that 3 in 10 people in 2022 that were staying in sheltered programs were families and children. Of those, almost 20,000 of them were unaccompanied children under the age of 18. And while national rates of homelessness have remained quite high for the past 3 years, but steady, rural areas have been increasing. They've increased 6% since in 2022. In addition, people always say that, well, if we respond to housing issues, then more people will just come because it's a thing to be homeless, to get the resources. When actually recent studies have found that only 20% of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in a West Coast city came to that city for services, which means 80% of the people who are houseless in our communities are from here.
Now that's a thing that I hear in so many spaces in Corvallis, this if we build it, they will come kind of narrative. Sean, do those numbers that Ashley just 80% of the people, do those align with data we know about those in our own community?
Definitely. We use a program called Shelterware in our across Unity Shelter, and others in the community use it as well. If you look back historically to the oldest records to the current, it's about 80% of the people that we serve are really from the Mid-Willamette Valley, from Lebanon to Newport. But the bulk of those are really Corvallis and Albany, but that's kind of our catchment area. And that's held very constant for a long time.
I know there's so much of this that we could go into in so much more detail and conversation together, but we have to be a little bit brief. Moksha, I'm part of the reason that we asked you to join us on the panel is not only because you're a board member of Unity Shelter and you've worked in our sort of suite of programs, but you have some experience in being unhoused. I wonder, I think that was in the state of Oregon, so it's not like you're from the East Coast and came to the West Coast to find social services. Can you tell us just a bit of your background?
Absolutely. So I'm originally from Southern Oregon, Jackson County. And so I'm 42, so I think I was about 32. I had some significant loss in my family, some trauma associated with it. I was a successful business manager and had a family, a wife, a child, and we had some loss. And due to that loss, I was unable to process it. I slowly became unable to hold the job, slowly became unable to keep a housing. And all of a sudden I found myself houseless, homeless. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't something that I really, it's when you're in it, you don't see it happening because it's incremental. And for me and for a lot of other people, it came down to not being able to process loss and trauma. And we all experience a lot of that.
Which is so, trauma doesn't happen just in your childhood experience, right? So those ACEs, I always think about, and trauma continues throughout the lifespan of an individual. So will you share with us, Moksha, a little about your experience working with Unity Shelter and especially if you'll focus in on the Hygiene Center, what it offers, and the importance of low barrier services.
Absolutely. So I started working at the Hygiene Center in 2021, and the Hygiene Center is very unique in the sense that it's open and helps so many people. The services that we provide: showers, laundry services, some basic medical needs as far as just bandages and things like that, as well as a hot or cold lunch throughout the day, depending on the day, some snacks. We also provide a friendly ear and a friendly voice to talk to be treated like a human. The low barrier aspect is very important. Services to people who need them often are high barrier, meaning if your physical or mental challenges that you're experiencing are significant enough, then you don't get help. We can't help you. So being a low barrier service, we were able to provide for people who have significant physical and mental challenges that they're dealing with at the moment. This provides an opportunity to make contact with them. And after making that contact, either they'll come to one of our overnight shelters, or we're able to help get them into other services with collaborative care, which is one of the goals of Unity Shelter's mission, is to be able to provide collaborative care. So we'll meet somebody, we'll start to get to know them, we'll build trust with them because we're serving them. A lot of the times, it'll be the first time this person's had positive interaction, humanity affirming interaction with somebody outside of their houseless community. And when we build that trust, we're able to find out what more help we could offer them.
You use a phrase that I've become really fond of. Just last week, you sort of said, "There's no wrong door." And I think about Unity as the only low barrier sheltering system in Benton County. I think about Unity being the front door often to those collaborative providers that we then work with. But when you say no wrong door, can you talk a little bit about what you mean?
Absolutely. It's a concept in social services and other care. Basically what it means is somebody might come to an overnight shelter seeking help, seeking somewhere to stay for the night. And once they get there, we find out they have other needs, greater needs that we may be able to help them with. Another example, somebody might come to a safe place here looking to get into a micro shelter, and that's not how it works. You don't just come and get into one, it's a process, but we've made contact with you, and now we can help get you into the shelter. We could possibly help get you some medical care. We can connect you with Jake, a traditional healthcare worker, and help you start navigating services that are available. So we get that point of contact, and while you might have not come to the door for the services you want, we can help find services that you can access.
I want to come back. That's a beautiful segue to Jake. So thanks for making it for me. We're going to ask Jake a question, but I'm curious about how many in the room know about the Hygiene Center, and that the Hygiene Center and the men's shelter are not the same operation. If you know that, yeah. So that means that some people don't realize that the Hygiene Center operates outside of the men's overnight shelter, and something I think we don't really think about in when we're thinking, well, how many people are we serving as social service organizations in the Valley, is that the daytime drop-in center does something very similar to the Hygiene Center in terms of accessing resources and support. And then we have the Hygiene Center, which, yes, there is some crossover between folks who are accessing services at both places, but not a ton of crossover. So if you think that in Benton County, we need 2 separate spaces that are still really not enough to serve folks just basic needs to get from one day to the next, I think that's pretty incredible. It underlines for me just a huge amount of need. Jake, I am so curious about the work you do, as there are 2 ways that I've heard it titled: traditional health worker and community health worker, and that your role within Unity Shelter has just transformed people's relationships to healthcare, especially. Can you tell me why? Like, what is that? What do you do? What's happening?
Okay, yeah, a little bit of overview of what a traditional health worker is. I'm specifically a community health worker, which is kind of a specified category of traditional health worker. So I help within the capacity of Unity Shelter. I work at, with the men's shelter and room at the inn clients. And I function as kind of a bridge to help them access healthcare and other resources. I don't look at health as just the absence of illness, but the overall ability to thrive. So I like to connect people to either case management for housing resources, help them obtain cell phones so they can actually communicate with healthcare providers, set up appointments, and communicate with their loved ones, because being connected is very important for our overall well-being. And I also help provide peer support. I am a shoulder to lean on and listen to their struggles on a daily basis and help them navigate it. I also will help some clients go to appointments and work as an escort, because many of them are afraid of the medical system. And lastly, because with how our current medical system functions and how fractured it is and how being unhoused is so misunderstood, I help care providers understand our clients' needs and address treatment options to meet them where they're at.
I think that bridge work you do between providers and the folks you work with, and the reality that you can accompany them because of your relationship with that individual, with trust and some vulnerability. I don't know of anything else like that in the tapestry of services that are offered. And I've heard Moksha talk about how critical your role is. Can you? I'm just curious, like, what do you think the most rewarding part of your role within the system, or you personally?
That is an excellent question. Honestly, it is the smile on the faces of the people that I help when I'm able to get them access to something that they didn't know they could access, whether it's me escorting them to a doctor's appointment and helping them feel heard and cared about by their doctors and building confidence within themselves. Or a lot of the times when I just give somebody who has mobility issues a walker or a wheelchair to utilize. I've seen a lot of people cry in tears when I just felt like it was a very simple thing to get them, but it means a lot to me.
Sean, what's the outcome of that, having that kind of traditional health worker be that bridge? Financially, what does it do for the ER, for example?
Well, it can be a huge savings for the hospital system. You know, one of the things that Jake does, and we've got another traditional health worker, community health worker that named Ryan. You know, they're working with people to establish relationships with their primary care provider. It's a lot cheaper to go to your primary care provider than to go to the emergency room, and probably faster and a more civil experience, I think. The ER is designed to move people through quickly and kind of provide some stabilization, and it's a very expensive way to get some basic healthcare needs met. So it's a big savings to the healthcare system. And the reason that we have traditional health workers right now is because the Intercommunity Health Network, which is the organization that runs the Oregon Health Plan in our region, they recognize the need for this, and they see the need for that enough that after the first pilot period that we opened up, they very easily decided to give us an extension on that grant and more funding for that to run it for another year, because they can see the results.
I saw you have a thought. Did you have a thought?
Oh, yes. In regard to clients who go to traditionally, a lot of our unhoused clients, yeah, they only see the ER basically as the point of source for healthcare. It's really hard to get them set up and for them to get themselves set up with a primary care doctor. And most of the time, when I've encountered clients trying to go to the ER, it is an attempt to address a chronic health issue that needs ongoing treatment, and that the ER simply provides very little benefit to alleviating their condition. And it's just, like Sean said, it's so much more expensive. And so within this, we're able to, when getting them connected to primary care, we're able to not only lower the costs of healthcare on a larger scale, but we are also able to improve the quality of care delivered.
Thank you. Mary, what Jake is saying reminds me of some conversation we had about just your experience within the healthcare system and how that's gone for you. But will you tell us a little bit about who you are and your story and your experiences in Corvallis?
Sure. I stayed at Room at the Inn, and I moved out here from Minnesota. I had lost my housing, and I found out about Room at the Inn through the drop-in center. And from there, I went and talked to the people at Room at the Inn. And this was back in 2017, so it's been quite a while since I've been there.
And you have a story of a progression through so many of our, because we really do work collaboratively in the social service arena in Benton County. So you've been in a lot of different organizations that you've interacted with as your housing journey has moved. Will you tell us about that? Yeah.
From Room at the Inn, I went to Van Buren House.
Corvallis Housing First in the room.
Yeah.
I'm sure they are somewhere. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much, you guys. You guys were wonderful. I just have to say that, without you, I wouldn't be where I am today.
And you're in an apartment today.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm in an apartment today. I've been there 3 years now. Success, and I'm also giving back, and I come and I volunteer at Room at the Inn in the kitchen.
And we're so grateful for your partnership. That means so much. One of the things that you talked about last week, Mary, that so stayed with me is the kind of bias that you experience.
Yeah, they still have me written down as homeless at Samaritan Health. And, I feel like I face, a little discrimination there.
And that you've done an incredible amount of hard work to be housed.
It was very difficult. I have PTSD, anxiety disorder, and it's been a real difficult road for me.
I just imagine that the chart, every time you encounter the chart at your health organization, the partner who's supposed to be working with you toward your own health and healing identifies you in a way that feels like it's discrimination, bias, and doesn't.
It's humiliating.
It's humiliating.
Because I feel like they disrespect me.
Yeah. And that's something that I don't know if you really want to share, but you said that it's not the hospital isn't the only place that you experience that kind of stigma.
No, I'm actually, I've been accosted at Safeway 7 times because the cops, they look at me and they say, oh, well, they accuse me of stealing at Safeway. I've never been arrested here, okay? I admit that I do have a record, you know, however, but that was way back in 1993, you know? But it's like, almost feel like my past is following me even here because the police look at me and they're putting me into a group.
So do housed people, right? Have records. So it's,
Well, yeah,
but what you're pointing out to us is that there's something about the bias and stigma that we associate with the way a person looks or the way a person presents or what we think might be the category that we fall into, that we start to make judgments about what they're up to, who they are, what category of good, bad, criminal, not criminal they might belong
yeah.
to.
It's hard.
Yeah, I hear that.
You know, sometimes it can be a real difficult thing. I mean, I get to the point, I don't even want to go into the doctor because I just feel like they take one look, oh, you're homeless, we don't care. You know, they don't. You know, that's how I feel.
Well, my heart grieves for that. And I hope that Unity Shelter is one of the places where we do better. We do a little bit better, not only in the way that we interact with folks who are living outside and in shelter with our staff but also that we play a part in providing educational opportunities for the community to hear what does it feel like to be in your shoes, and what are things people need to know. I guess, Mary, that's maybe the question I want to ask you before we go to Sean is, what do you want people to know about your experience?
My experience with the Unity Shelter system has been one of the most remarkable. It's from my own heart, it's been so remarkable. You guys have seen me through the most difficult time in my life, and I'm now in a position where I can come and give back. And that really means a lot to me, that I can come and give back.
Really thankful for your willingness to do that and being engaged. And just one more curiosity, and then what do you wish people knew about what it was like when you were living in the shelter? Or
it was very difficult, but with the staff members, they were so understanding and, you have to say, loving. You know, everybody that's involved in the shelter system, from the top to even the staff members, or even the cook, or even, you know, volunteers, like the situation I'm in the kitchen, volunteering, helping. It's my way of giving back. I can, you know, say, hey, how's your day going? Because they did that for me. They really cared.
that reminds me of a couple of different things we've already said, that the kind word, maybe Moksha said it, the kind word that a person might receive at the shelter might be the only time in the entire day that someone saw them, recognized them as human, and had something kind to say.
Exactly, because, you know, people look at you and they think you're an animal out there. You know, that it's really difficult. You know, I'm a human being and I am somebody, and I'm not, you know, someone that's going to be stealing from you or anything like that. You know, and it's just difficult to have the label on you.
I think it contributes to this sense of social isolation that I heard Taryn, who's the manager at the men's shelter, talk about in the video, and that we have talked about in different ways. The extreme loneliness and sadness and impact on one's health and wellness that comes from that sense of isolation. Sean, that's something that I know you think a lot about as well. Can you talk a little bit about what you think of, I guess, when you hear these stories and these anecdotes of what it's like to be in the position of?
Well, I guess the first thing I think of is just the incredible gratitude I have to staff and volunteers and people like Mary coming back and giving back. I think that we have an incredibly compassionate staff. We have a network of partners in the community that are incredibly compassionate too. Beyond that, I think that we, as a culture, are often a lot more interested in the attributes of somebody, how much property they might have, things like that. Are they housed or unhoused? Than the fact that we all share basic human needs that you can't escape. We all need not only basic things like a roof over our head and heat and food, but we all need to be seen. We all need to be recognized as being worthy, regardless of our station in life. And I think that all too often, what happens to people that are out is that's not how they're viewed. They're discriminated against. There's a bias against them. The stigma that suggests that somehow they are other. And I often hear comments about folks that are unhoused and unsheltered and camping in the community. Why can't they pick up their trash? Why can't they, keep a cleaner campsite? Why? Like, well, they don't have trash service. They probably don't have access to bathrooms very easily. They don't have access to showers and laundry often. And it's one of the reasons we opened up the hygiene center. They don't have the things that those of us with housing take for granted every day. And if you're living rough, it's not like you have a refrigerator to handle your food, let alone any kind of medicines you might need for chronic illnesses. You might not have any of the resources that you need to be able to cook. And so you're going to eat differently. You're going to eat prepackaged food. It's going to generate a lot more trash, a lot more waste, and you don't have any trash service around. Republic doesn't show up every week and tote away all of the leavings. And I think we blame people for conditions that they really can't control. And yeah, you could say, well, people should, bag up their stuff and haul it to the trash. Well, if you're living in a tent and the nearest place to put your trash is 500 yards away, that's a big walk. You're going to leave your belongings. You're going to leave them vulnerable to other people. It's a dicey proposition. And I just think we, as a society, we need to be a lot more understanding of the conditions that people live in and how incredibly difficult it is. I reflect back on Bonnie's comment in the video about just how emotionally sapping it is to be out and physically taxing it is to live out. And even if you're living in shelter, you're still not fully kitted out in the way that those of us with housing are.
Sometimes I've heard you say, in terms of sometimes people will say, well, how long does it take for someone to move from transitional housing into, or from emergency shelter into, and you say a thing, and I'm not sure that you actually mean to connect the two, but I do in my head. You say, you have to do enough for long enough. Will you say what you mean by that?
So, I have to give credit. There was a person at a conference that said that, and I stole their formula. You have to do enough for long enough, and that means different things for each person. The Safe Place program, we have an average length of time that people are in a micro-shelter, transitional housing setting of about 6.5 months. But we've had people that have moved through in 30 days, and we've had people that have taken 2.5 years. And a lot of it depends on what their particular needs are. Do they have significant healthcare needs that need to stabilize before they can focus on other things? Do they have their ID? Do they have any kind of resources if they're going to have to pay rent? Are they going to, do they have any income, whether it's disability or other income? Are they connected to basic services? everybody that shows up at our shelters and the hygiene center and other services has a kind of a different matrix of issues that really need to be addressed. And we need to really engage with them in a deep way to understand what those needs are.
When you say that, I think the way I interpret it and think about it is you have to stay committed to relationship. You have to be able to sustain this mutuality of trust to continue to move through whatever obstacles there are, whatever paths, and it's not simply one transaction after another.
No, it's really walking on a journey with somebody, accompanying them on a path that can have a lot of twists and turns. And sometimes people will get all the things worked out, or they think they do, that are going to get them back into housing, and then we're in the process of applying for housing, and you find, no, actually you've got an unpaid utility bill from 1997 that we need to find some resources to pay for, or something like that. It's a journey, and it's always a kind of a bespoke or custom solution that has to be developed with people. The case managers that we work with from Corvallis Housing First, that's part of the secret sauce that they bring to that, is trying to understand the particular needs that a person has and what kind of barriers are there. And then people like Jake and Ryan doing the healthcare work, and the rest of our staff that really are trying to understand the particularities of an individual. There's no monolithic homeless person out there. Everybody's a little bit different and has different needs. And I think that's one of the kind of myths to break down in our culture, is that, that everybody that's out has got the same issues, whether it's mental health or addiction or other things. Like, no, it's custom every time.
I have two more questions for you before we transition to some Q&A, and brief responses, which I know will be difficult because they're both big and challenging questions. But if you could sort of like summarize, when you talk to people about what makes the Unity Shelter unique, what do you think, or what is your hope that people feel when they're connected to Unity?
I think, and so when I started in this work, I was first at the men's shelter, and that's when it was really just the men's shelter is what I worked with. We certainly communicated a lot with Room at the End, but that was, my space was more the men's shelter, and from those earliest days till now, what I really wanted to make sure is that anybody that comes in the door feels welcome and respected, and that they that they never felt or never needed to feel shame for being there. And I think that as we've grown into this organization now, there's so much work that we do with all of our new staff and continuing education and training as folks go along, that's focused on that, right? How do you care for people? How do you recognize the trauma in their lives? How do you interact with people that have experienced significant trauma in their lives in a way that you don't re-traumatize them, in a way that you respect the challenges that they have? It's so important that our staff and volunteers can recognize their own bias and set it aside and meet people where they're at, and really see them as an individual in front of them and not a problem to be solved.
And when you think about Corvallis, Benton County, the situation that is, where do you see the work that needs to be done the growing edge to push in the crisis of extreme poverty and housing?
The short answer, right?
I would like the shortest answer you can possibly muster.
I think as a community, we need a lot of things. More shelter capacity, more transitional housing, more permanent supported housing, all of those housing bits. But I often think that, when I kind of dial that back in a little bit to just Unity Shelter, we need more capacity to do the deeper care. We need more capacity for the work that Jake represents here on this panel, and that Moksha talked about even at the hygiene center, being able to really, provide that welcoming face, and then, as you said, really engage in relationship over time and build that trust and understanding so that we can, can help facilitate that custom solution that's needed, right? I mean, it's very hard to look around and see the number of people that are out and know that it's just a resource issue, right? Like if we had more resources for the community overall, Unity Shelter certainly, but for the community overall, we need more mental health resources, we need more healthcare resources, we need more addiction and treatment and things like that. We need more work just to help develop life skills so that people that are coming out of being homeless can get back into housing and be successful there over time. I don't know if that answers your question.
There was no wrong answer. Yeah. So Mary and I are both going to transition to a slightly different space. Ilea is going to, use Mary's help for a task, and we're going to move to a bit of Q&A. And I guess that we'll share one microphone, and I'll come out to you all with my mic. And when you're forming your question and when you're ready to ask it, just raise your hand and then tell us who the question is for. Or maybe you don't know who the question is for, so you're just, whoever is best suited to answer this question might be how we're addressing the panel. But who has been thinking about something? Yes. Will you use this? Thank you.
Hi, Jake. Thank you all for this. I'm wondering if your job just sounds so enormous. So I'm wondering how much help you have. Is it just you, and what kind of qualifications a person needs to do a work like yours?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Well, originally with our traditional health worker program, our supervisor, Ilea, we hired four traditional health workers and got 4 certified, but now life happened and we're down to 2. There is me that serves the low barrier shelters, the men's shelter and room at the inn. And Ryan, he is the other one that serves 3rd Street Commons and Safe Camp. Basically, the requirements for a traditional health worker, we have to complete a 100-hour course initially to obtain our certification. And we are state certified, and theoretically we could be reimbursed via insurance. But yeah, what was the second part of the question?
How many of you, and you answered that, and the qualifications. I'm curious about your qualifications before the 100 hours as well.
Do you have to have a medical degree?
No, most certainly not. With traditional health workers, primarily they are sourced kind of from from shared experience and working with community. But within my personal previous experience, I used to work as a EMT, and I also volunteered with Occupy Medical in Eugene, which provides free medical services to unhoused individuals. And I also ran a nonprofit chapter for a harm reduction group called Dance Safe. And I'm currently in my undergraduate program for public health at OSU.
I can tell you that they're in very high demand, Jake and Ryan, and could use more hours and more like clones of themselves.
And Jake, did you go through the clinical training as well?
Yes, I also went through a 2-month, 300-hour clinical training over the summer. So I have a little bit higher level of CHW certification, but I don't know.
John.
Thank you very much for the presentation today. A question I have is that we talk about the unhoused youth. Do you have contact with or interaction with the unhoused youth?
I'll take that on a little bit, and Moksha can too. So in our shelter and transitional housing programs, we only serve 18 and older. Hygiene center might be a little bit different answer.
That's what I was thinking. For the hygiene center, we provide showers and laundry service to anybody who comes up and needs it. And oftentimes there are homeless youth that do. And then we inform them of other collaborative care, such as Jackson Street Youth Services. We'll let them know that that exists as well.
And I can just say, as sort of a volunteer and someone who works with Safe Place, that we are in regular communication as providers across. So Jackson Street is in weekly conversations with Unity Shelter staff, just what's going on, who needs what, how can we work collaboratively?
Yeah, and I will clarify a little bit. So in our transitional housing program, we have at times been able to take a parent and child. And it really kind of depends on the particular circumstances and needs of that, parent and child. But it's possible. We've got a couple of spots where we can do that.
I'd like to just build on Jake's presentation. Unqualified, these healthcare workers are the highest leverage investment we have made in this community in terms of facilitating access to health care for those who are unhoused. They not only work with the individuals and go to appointments with them, they remind them of the appointments, they set up transportation often for them, they interface with the healthcare system. People get to appointments because of them who otherwise would not. So it just streamlines their access to healthcare, and also doesn't plug up healthcare availability for the rest of the community by people not making appointments. So you guys are doing an amazing job, and I appreciate it.
Hello, I'm wondering, and this is probably Sean's expertise, but what's the estimate of how many unhoused people are in our community, and what percentage are taking advantage of the options for some kind of cover over them?
So across Unity Shelter, starting Monday when we reopen the men's shelter and go up to full capacity again, we'll have 100 beds of emergency shelter and another 60 beds of more transitional housing between Third Street Commons and the micro shelter program. And we've got a little capacity in an emergency hotel shelter program. So there's about 160 just in Unity Shelters beds. Then there's also Cardva, Jackson Street, COI. So you think, you know, we're adding up into the 200 and 300 range there. And then you think about the people that are served by the drop-in center and the hygiene center. We see pretty regularly 60 to 70 people at the hygiene center a day. The drop-in center sees similar and higher numbers at times. So I think that overall, in terms of people who are without permanent housing, you're probably looking into the 400, 500, 600 range. I think in terms of people that are literally camping right now, you're probably in the more like 200 range. And I'm looking at Jim to see if that sounds right, or Jen. Yeah, oh, you're distracting my
I distracted Jim.
Yeah.
Sean's asking you a question. I need you.
Do you think 200 is a reasonable guess at number of people that are out camping right now? Or higher still?
It's difficult. They won't hold still because someone makes it impossible for them to hold still.
I would say it's in the 200 to 300 range.
Yeah.
200 to 300 range, those who are camping or out, not participating in the programs.
Is that not participating
So
of their own wit? What does that mean when you say that?
I mean, I think that, you know, a lot of those folks are going to be seen by the hygiene center or the drop-in center, and through those services, they're going to get connected with other services. It's also just important to remember that the folks that you see are, you know, are only part of the unsheltered in our community. There are a lot of people that are living in their cars or RVs or couch surfing, doubled up, sleeping in somebody's garage. When you see the point in time count, which in 2024, we'll do another point in time count in our community and across the nation in late January, you'll end up seeing numbers a little later in the year. And please remember that it will always be an undercount because it's very hard to find people that are sleeping in their cars or in other places that don't always want to be seen and counted. So the count that we get largely is the sheltered count. The unsheltered count is really hard to nail down. And I think if you went to, and it's not only folks that are unsheltered that go to Stone Soup meals, but if you showed up here on a Thursday evening and saw the Stone Soup meal, you'd see a lot of people roll into the parking lot to pick up a meal that are sleeping in their car. And they've somehow managed to pull that together.
Yeah, I'm coming. I'm going to go here first. Get ready.
My question probably is to you, Sean. I'm curious about how you're being funded, the Unity Shelter, and what are the real needs are as we project into another cold season. I think, and to give us some flavor as to how many agencies you're really working with to really make this happen.
So on the funding side of the coin, many of you have probably gotten letters in the mail or in your email inbox, especially over the last 6 months, just outlining the fact that we really hit a financial snag this year because a lot of our funding has come in the last 3 years, especially through the state. And
can I just say, please don't steal all of Jenny's thunder.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'll give you the brief highlight there, right? So a lot of our funding comes from the state. A lot of that got completely rerouted. There's new paths for funding from the state that have taken a long time to get set up. And really only in the last couple of weeks have we gotten signed contracts for some of our state funding. A lot of the federal funding has dried up that was associated with COVID that actually allowed us to grow to meet demand in the last few years. We get right now about 10% of our budget has been coming from donations. This year, we need to kind of pull the numbers again, but it's going to end up being a higher percentage this year than in years past because that delay in state funding, we went out to donors to ask for more support to help bridge that gap, and really went nearly 5 months without any additional support from state or federal sources.
I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Oh, I'm going to come back to you, Kay Renee. I promise I see you. Maybe I'll do 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
I was on the tour earlier, excuse me, and you had shared some about, it sounds like in the coming year, there's some expansion happening in regards to the micro-housing, and you mentioned a number of churches that are participating in this already, such as this community here. I was just kind of curious, are there other churches that you've been in touch with that have expressed interest, or is there a need to explore that? Maybe, for myself. Oh, I don't know how much of that you got.
I got most of it.
Yeah, I'm part of a local church that I don't think is participating in this from what I know. So I'm wondering if there's a desire or if there's a need to kind of explore with other local churches that might be interested in helping with micro-housing. That's kind of the question. Yeah, thank you.
So you're standing right next to somebody who's done a lot of conversations with churches to try and find more partners. We're definitely interested in expanding. I think that it's, there's always this question, and this year definitely underscored it, of how much can we grow and sustain that operation, right? So there's a little bit of carrying capacity there, but we're working with Corvallis Evangelical on the possibility of expanding the number there. We're working with Life Community Church up on 99 for expansion of the footprint that we have there. We've got another church on Western, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is in conversations about putting some there. And the City Council Monday will consider changes to the city code that governs the permits for microshelters to allow us to go, currently we're limited to 4 in an installation. Safe Camp is, when Safe Camp was started and when those microshelters went in, it was part of the county. So our original permits here were with the county, which allowed us to get to the 16. But the city has not allowed more than 4 historically, but the code revision that's up Monday, City Council would allow us to go between 5 and 25. And so we're definitely interested, and that can be on private ground, it could be on church ground. It's really more a matter of whether or not we've got willing partners to work with. So
I think the short answer to that question was yes. And if you are a representative of a faith community and would like to talk more, you can talk to me.
Sean, in recent times we've seen the city of Corvallis continue to move people from wherever they're camped, and quite recently said, oh, it's okay, you can put up your tent in front of the courthouse from 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. with total disregard about where they might actually live. And what does it take to involve the city of Corvallis in essentially creating a managed campground that provides the various needs that people have, that enables them to have the security of having a home to go to, be it a tent, at least each evening, instead of worrying about being shuttled somewhere else. I mean, that strikes me as being the ultimate level of unsettledness. Got any ideas?
Oh, John, yeah. How much time do I have?
You have 90 seconds. And Ashley actually has some thoughts about the viability of camp sweeps.
Good.
That's a really long conversation. But I will just say that if folks have not listened to the podcast, A Place to Sleep by the Albany Herald, that there's some cities and localities around here that are doing some great work. And I think from our community, we can put more pressure to ask why similar things aren't happening in a city that has a lot of resources.
I want to also volunteer. Oh, I like the clap. Yeah. That's nice. I'm going to volunteer Sean and maybe Ashley and John, who just asked the question, any others, to maybe huddle around a table, because we're going to do another tour of Safe Camp. But if you've already been, you want to talk a little bit about advocacy and managed camping, get those people to sit down somewhere and have that conversation, because it's an important one. And I know our board president needs to have her time. So I'm going to move us in that direction.
Hi, thank you, all of you, for what you do. Very grateful to support this effort in any way I can. I want to not make this a big deal question, but how is it going in the relationship with the local police department or area law enforcement officials?
Well, I guess I'd give two answers to that. You know, in terms of our facilities, the shelters and the micro-shelter program, we have a pretty positive relationship with law enforcement, and it's pretty critical for us, right? Especially at the shelters, we need to know that if we call, they're going to come, and they do. And they're respectful and helpful and are really kind of a critical partner for us. I think in terms of the broader community and the issues around unmanaged camping and things like that, it's more challenging. I mean, I think that it's not, I would not put that solely on the police department. I would say this kind of goes back to John's question about camping in the community. I think that we have a significant challenge trying to get city leadership to think creatively about how do we solve some of these issues and how do we partner more effectively, both police and the nonprofit community and other city staff. How do we think this through in a way and stop finding all the ways to say, no, you can't do that here, and start figuring out how to get to yes. Because I don't think this problem is going to go away. I don't think that it's right or just that there are so many people that can't get their basic needs met and have a safe night's sleep. When we started the men's shelter, the goal was safe sleep. And I think that everybody deserves a safe place to sleep.
I do really encourage those of you who want to talk about managed camping to have a bit of a conversation. And if you just want to talk about like what in the world is happening with the city, we may have a bit of a local celebrity in the room who has some ideas about that. Ginny.
I don't think I need to say anything more. Sean has said it all. Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. That was wonderful. Thank you for participating in this very informative dialogue. I am Ginny Lucker, and I'm fortunate to be the board president for Unity Shelter Board this year. And on behalf of the rest of the board and of the staff, it is truly an honor to have you all here this afternoon. As we've already discussed a little bit, it's okay to steal my thunder. Unity Shelter has only begun recovering from what has been a very real, serious financial crisis this year. As Sean mentioned, this summer, we kind of suddenly became aware that the reliable funding from state and federal sources just disappeared. The COVID funds dried up, and the state funds that had historically come through the Community Services Consortium, Consortium was not funded to provide service to us. So we were left to develop new pathways. Sean and his staff have been incredible in terms of working to find those pathways, work through them to be able to apply for funding. And it has taken months and months. We survived during that time by making unfortunate and dramatic cuts. We had to temporarily close the men's shelter, consolidated that with the women's shelter to have a smaller co-ed shelter since the beginning of July. We had to reduce the hours of the hygiene center. We laid off or eliminated shifts for a third of the Unity Shelter staff. And these were painful and unfortunate and devastating to the staff and also to the people who rely on the services that we provide. Because of our financial reserves and the donor response that we had from so many of you in this room, when we made you aware of this during the summer, we were able to continue to operate, but it has been a very stressful period. And as a board, each month we would sit down and decide, do an assessment. Do we have enough money to continue to operate for the next month or the next 2 months? And remarkably and amazingly, every month there has been enough to get by through donations and from smaller grants. And I am so excited, Sean mentioned it, as of last week, we got the final contracts in place for the state funding, and on Monday night, we will be reopening the men's shelter. We'll be able to increase the capacity at the women's shelter back to what it used to be. We will be able to reestablish the hygiene center at its regular operational level and begin to get our staff back. So that is really exciting news. It has been a very challenging year, and yet we're emerging from it with greater clarity about how critical our work is and how essential the front door of Unity Shelter is to the landscape of housing and supportive services in Benton County. We've also been able to establish better where the growing edges are in terms of us becoming better at being able to be the kind of partners that our most vulnerable neighbors need. We have also just completed a second federal single audit. It's an intense audit that is required based on the level of federal funding we've gotten in the past. And the results of both those years of audits have pointed to very solid fiscal management by our executive director and the board. We take very seriously our obligation to be good stewards of the money that is intended to go to serve the people in our community that need it most. Our board now is more diverse than it has ever been. Our staff is strong and effective in their work. They're committed to providing the shelter and supportive services centered around the inherent dignity and autonomy of each individual that we have the opportunity to work with. And of course, it is largely because of people like you and your donations that we can continue to do the work that we're doing. Right now, I think Mary has been coming around with cards and envelopes. These can function as a way for you to either make a donation today to Unity Shelter or to pledge financial commitment. There's, of course, a QR code, if you know what those are, and now they all do. Last year I looked at this and said, what do I do with this? If you would like to pay with a card or use an electronic payment system like PayPal or Venmo, of course we will take an old-fashioned check. We'll try to make it easy for you. If you have any questions about the donation form, there are board members standing all around the room. Raise your hand if you're a board member. And any of the board members will be glad to answer any questions or point you to somebody who can answer your question. If you are interested in making a gift of stock or would like information for your financial advisor, again, the board members would be happy to help you out with that. Finally, I encourage you to, on the donation form, include your email address, because one of our commitments is to do a better job of communicating with you throughout the year as to what our community needs are and how we can partner together to serve those needs. Once again, thank you for the ways that you directly contribute to disrupting poverty, oppression, and isolation in our community. We hope that you will continue to partner with us and participate in the work that makes our entire community healthier, safer, and stronger. As Jen mentioned, there's going to be another tour of Safe Camp. Jen's going to be leading this tour. If you want to join her, meet her out in the foyer right outside the sanctuary. And if you want to have a nice conversation with with Sean and others, I mean this is the most important work that we're doing right now, and it's really difficult. But Sean, where are you going to be meeting? Right here? Okay. Or if you just want to talk with any of the other board members, any of our panelists, we're here to answer your questions or take your suggestions or ideas. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.